Hello, railroad friends. Welcome to PSR, People Speaking Rail. I'm Mike Baudendistel. I'm the head of Intermodal Solutions here at FreightWaves, and I'm joined, as always, by Joanna Marsh. And Joanna, it seems like you're so busy that you have also recruited Rachel Premack and John Kingston to write railroad articles.
Yes, of course. Yes. I'm glad that they did great stories. So, I think I could just take the rest of my time off and, just let them do all the stuff. So.
Yeah, they write about a variety of topics, but it seems like there's so much to talk about in railroad industry. They've gravitated towards your sector. So maybe a way to start is let's talk about a little bit of the mixed reaction to the CP-KCS approval. You did a story on that where you talked to some shippers, of course, talked to some communities. But what did you gather from talking to those groups? There's the article on picture of your article.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because I think even when the Surface Transportation Board was reviewing the merger and they held those hearings, even then, there were some shippers that weighed in, but even then, there wasn't really, for the most part, a clear consensus with shippers in terms of like, we approve this merger or we don't approve this merger. I know that there are some groups perhaps that, maybe like upper Midwest grain shippers, but for the most part, there wasn't really, it was a lot of individual shippers being for or against the merger, kind of depending on where they were in the network. And so the feedback that I got from some shippers about the merger that was approved last week was, kind of like a wait and see kind of thing. It's like, the STB approved the merger with the idea that it might improve competition, sort of the idea that, having one major railroad, the combined CP-KCS network, would be better than having two distinct railroads kind of trying to keep competition going. So it was. I think a lot of shippers were kind of like in the wait and see mode. It was interesting because the American Chemistry Council said, they were also in that wait and see mode, but some of the recommendations that they had for the to set for the STB to set as conditions, didn't make the cut, so to speak, when STB did issue its conditions. So, but yeah, for the most part,
I mean, what did they ask for that?
I should know this and I don't.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know if it's. I don't know honestly how specific they were in their recommendations. I think. One of those ongoing questions, besides competition is, with the rates, like how, so I'm not sure, if there were particular schemes, I should go back with them and check with them and see. But yeah, but I think that's just kind of one ongoing question, sort of the rates issue and, ensuring fair rates. So I don't know, but what did you think of the, I don't know. Have you heard anything from on your end about how people reacted to the merger? Or
yeah. So I think it's interesting that there's kind of this lack of consensus on the part of shippers, and even kind of a lack of consensus among shipper groups. How that American Chemistry Council, you talked about how there's different members had different perspectives there. I think on the agriculture side, it was interesting that some of the soybean companies seemed to like it, while some of the other U.S. grain companies didn't like it, and it's a little bit like, well, maybe that makes the case that there is, as we look at a map of the combined networks, that looks nice. I mean, I think it makes the case when you have some of the grain companies that say, well, the soybean companies seem to like it. Well, a lot of those soybeans do get exported out of the Pacific Northwest. And so I think a lot of those companies like it because they see, well, before, in order to move soybeans, maybe the best option was moving it on, BNSF, through the port of Vancouver. And now this might create another option to take it north, through the port of Vancouver. I meant BNSF through Seattle, but now if you can take it through Canada, port of Vancouver. So I think some of the the soybean side, they seem to think it's more competitive. I know during the process, some of the U.S. Farmers thought, well, this would make the U.S. Grain face greater competition with the Canadian grain for Mexican consumption, but that does seem to make the case that this enhances competition in the industry. Also thought it was interesting your line in your article about the American Chemistry Council say, okay, well, now hopefully the Surface Transportation Board now is beyond this thing, which has taken up all their time. They can look at reciprocal switching, which would be something that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think they're. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I think they're pretty eager. I think probably all the shippers really, those main shipper groups are fairly eager to get the other agenda that the STB has before them, like get rolling. So yeah, because you have the reciprocal switching, you have but yeah, so so yeah, it'll be interesting to see when STB, now that that's the merger's behind them, like when they'll take up the other issues and like how soon afterwards. So.
Yeah, you also talked in your article about the Western Suburbs, how they, of course, hated the merger. They seem to hate all mergers. They hated the CN merger back when they acquired the EJ&E. But it's interesting. And part of their argument was that the railroads would move more hazardous materials, through their communities, which that seems to make the case that that they weren't trying to make, that the railroad should merge, because the Surface Transportation Board was considering the movement of hazardous materials as part of its argument, for or against the merger being in the public's best interest. They view the public's best interest as having those hazardous materials on the railroad rather than the highway. So I thought that was interesting. They had some stats in there that there's a very small percentage. I can't remember, 1% of the hazardous material spill comes on the railroad, whereas like 94% comes on the highway. So I'm not sure that the Western Suburbs made the best argument there.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just the concern about like how much traffic will increase. The Western Suburbs were concerned that STB was looking at numbers provided by CP, which they thought might be I don't want to say biased numbers, but perhaps not as neutral as they could appear to be, and so there is that concern that STB underestimated how much traffic will occur, and of course with the traffic, the block crossings, of course, and so that's part of the reason why STB decided to have the 7-year period of oversight versus 5 years to ensure that that things get worked out.
Yeah, so we'll continue to watch that and look for more shippers' reactions. Want to move on to topic number 2 here, which intermodal volume down double digits year over year. It looks like to me that intermodal volume is in a recession. I think if the only thing that you could look at was intermodal volume, you would think that we were in a pretty severe recession. I can go through some of these statistics. So U.S., this is based on the AR data that came out yesterday, U.S. containerized intermodal volume down 10% year over year in the past 4 weeks. The rails internally tend to look at the volume over 4 weeks because 1 week's not a trend. But in the past week, down 15%. I'm talking about just U.S. containerized intermodal volume, and it's down 9.6% year to date. So very weak there, particularly the past week. I have the data on a chart on domestic intermodal volume, so this is just going to limit it to the 53-foot loaded containers, excluding any international containers, excluding any empties. And this is down about 8% year over year when we take a look at that, and trending kind of remarkably in line with 2020. 2020 is in orange there. but down about 8% versus 2022. It looks like it's down about 6% versus 2021. So lots of weakness there. If you want to flip it to the international intermodal volume, taking a look at the 40-foot containers and 20-foot containers, those look even worse. Those are down about, let's call it 15% year over year. And so these have really been hurt by, not just, the imports coming down, but, higher inventory levels. And, there was some thought that because the ocean containers are more available, that more of those ocean containers would be sent inland on the railroad, and that would help some of these international container intermodal volumes, but that doesn't seem to have been the case. So those have been particularly hurt. There. I have another chart that shows basically a tree map of going back to domestic intermodal container volume. So these are the densest domestic intermodal lanes in the United States, and I'm showing this just on domestic loaded volume, and those percent changes are year over year. And for considering that domestic intermodal volume overall is down about 8%, kind of remarkably mixed. But really, what stands out to me there is the big LA outbound lanes, which are the densest intermodal lanes in North America. These LA to Chicago is down 11% year over year in terms of domestic. LA to Dallas down about 22%, LA to Atlanta down 16%. So it's really these outbound LA volumes that seem to be sort of the tail that's wagging the dog. And then on the sort of the backhauls, which you think like Chicago to LA, backhaul lane, that's up 8% year over year. So there's a little bit more balance in the intermodal network, which can help container utilization. It can also just help the efficiency of moving the containers. But really, sort of overall, I think if a shipper is looking at this, shipper should say, well, this means just intermodal containers are going to be more available. We've talked a lot on the FreightWaves website about the falling import volume into the port of LA. Greg Miller wrote a good article about that, where he's talking about import volume in the port of LA being down 30 or 40% year over year. So not seeing a lot of evidence that we're going to see any major pickup in intermodal volume. And there's several other data points in FreightWaves that suggest something similar. We have all those intermodal spot rates, which those have sort of flatlined at a low level. We have intermodal, tender rejection rates, which those are basically zero. It's all basically not auto accept. And then this chart that you're looking at is intermodal contract rates, which most of intermodal is going to move on a contract rate, and you see that's down year to date, down about 5%. But this most recent data point, you see that white line, how it's dipped from February into March. That's now down about 8% year over year. Some of the background here is that these are only line haul rates, so they exclude fuel. And this drop of, let's call it a high single digit decline, comes after 2 consecutive years of increases in rates that were into the double digits, going from 2020 up double digits into 2021, up double digits again into 2022, and now it's going the other way. And what's interesting also is that the truckload rates, the dry van rates, had been going down steadily sort of throughout last year. More truckload volume is going to be on a quarterly bid cycle. Intermodal volume tends to be more on an annual bid cycle. Most of that gets repriced in the first half of the year. So it does seem like these rates have further to fall based on everything we're seeing in the marketplace. So that's a little bit of an intermodal update. I want to go into topic number 3, which discusses another one of your articles, Joanna. NTSB finds anomalies with pressure relief devices. When I first saw this, I jumped on it and thinking, well, wow, I thought they were just in the fact-finding phase of the East Palestine, Ohio situation, but these were different derailments. So there's been a lot of derailments to talk about here.
Yeah, it's interesting, like how, and to be honest, I haven't really been reading every single NTSB report prior to the latest derailment. So I'm not familiar with how often they prescribe these recommendations. I mean, I'm sure there is, some recommendations offered, but yeah, it is interesting just how you have with each of these derailments. There was one NTSB advisory, with the valves as you mentioned in the covers, which was with East Palestine, and then there were two other ones. One was the derailment in Alabama, and then the other one involved the fatality in Cleveland, and just and the preliminary recommendations they have there. I think it's just it's part of that broader push for more oversight in general. I mean, of course, you had that unusual move by NTSB several weeks ago, saying that they were going to, do a special not investigation, but just sort of a special look at how Norfolk Southern has been engaging in its safety practices, which is, usually don't target a particular company or in the stage of the game, so to speak. So, so there's just been a lot of activity with NTSB, I guess, also because there's been a lot of derailments as well, for better or for worse. And it's also interesting because also for better or for worse, the derailments keep coming. I mean, we have Norfolk Southern, of course, but then, there was another derailment that involved, I think, like 5,000 gallons of diesel released. I'm not quite sure if that's the right number, but that happened in Washington State involving a BNSF train a few days ago. And then, of course, you've had I think in the news, like derailments with CSX and Union Pacific trains. Some of them have been a little bit more minor. I think one of the derailments was involved corn syrup. And so, so it's, but it's still, I think after every single derailment that's happened since early February, there's been this sort of jittery sort of knee-jerk reaction in terms of, like, what's next? Oh, well, there's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one. And of course, what was it? Like, I think in 2022, there were 911 derailments by Class 1 railroads that occurred. But those derailments can be, anything from, the cars falling off to, just to something more minor. So, but that's still a lot of derailments. So, yeah.
It is 900 in a year. Now, a lot of those can get cleaned up before any media can know about it, and they're not really a big deal. But I think this has gotten to be a area that there's just a lot of focus on. What's interesting, you sent me this this link that you did. I guess I had missed this one, but you go through some of the discussion about derailments, and you mentioned that the cause of derailments in about, let's call it, half the cases is human factors. So someone who works on the railroad making some mistake, which it's interesting because the positive train control was supposed to stop a lot of those things that were caused by human error. And I guess I was thinking it was more based on track. So were you surprised to see that in data?
Well, it's actually, sorry, to clarify a little bit. So it's actually not just the derailments, it's the train accidents altogether. So derailments are part of that. So it's just all the train accidents. I know it's a little confusing. I think, but it is interesting that with all the train accidents, that human factor is the leading cause among all the U.S.-based Class 1 railroads. I included KCS, even though they were kind of in a unique situation. But I think for Norfolk Southern, it was actually the lead cause of accidents in 2022. But it was really for all of them, UP and CSX and BNSF as well. But what's the other interesting thing, though, that's been going on? So you've had there was a hearing with this conducted by the Senate Commerce Committee on Wednesday, which was was probably, I haven't finished listening to it yet. I took the day off yesterday, it was probably fairly similar to another hearing that I think it was a labor committee had like a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, in which they bring out Norfolk Southern's CEO Alan Shaw to testify, and at yesterday's hearing, I believe the two Ohio senators were involved as witnesses, as they were in the other Senate hearing from a week and a half ago, and so it just seems to be that extra sort of scrutiny or push for some sort of rail safety regulation to happen. Why did I bring up that though? I brought that up because I think at the hearing they were talking about how Norfolk Southern's accident rate has increased in the last several years, and that's also in the data that's in the article that you mentioned. I think it's called like this article called?
5 questions you might ask about freight train accidents.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you look at like the data all together, you do see an upward trend line. But then if you break down that data, that increase is actually not because of accidents on the main line, but an increase in accidents at the rail yards. And that's actually for the 4 major class 1s, UP, NS, BNSF, and CSX. So you've had a significant increase, well, not significant, but a, what's the word? I mean, it's very apparent that there's been an increase in the last 10 years in rail yard accidents, or at least that rate of rail yard accidents. And that increase kind of feeds into that overall accident rate.
Yeah, and having them at the rail yards, it seems like that's a double-edged sword, right? Because it's like there's less harm to residential communities if the derailments and accidents take place at the rail yards. However, there's more potential for injury and death among workers when they take place at the rail yards.
Yeah. So, and I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure like what sort. I'm sure that within the industry there's talk about if there is sort of an earnest look at in reducing that accident rate at the rail yards, what sort of what they're doing. But it seems like a lot of the discussion right now, at least at the federal level among congressional lawmakers, is just sort of those I won't say flashier accidents, but the ones that that frankly aren't at the rail yard but are affecting the main line more, which I guess at the same time, as you mentioned, would affect populations more than what happens at the rail yard.
Yeah, and this data does sort of suggest, it seems to make the case that maybe some of these incidents are not caused, are maybe at least there's a contributing factor of not having enough personnel or trained personnel and all of those things. And this argument the unions make that a lot of these incidents have been caused by doing too much with too few people, maybe that are too fatigued. I think it supports that argument. It's kind of interesting to see that data. We just have about a minute and a half left. I'm sort of sick of talking about sick days. So I'll talk about your other thing you wrote about, the Greenbrier order surprise market to the upside. I have a stock chart on there which shows some of the Greenbrier's volatility. But, this was one I used to cover. They're going to have when I was a stock analyst. So not a great investment return since beginning of 2021, but it was up about 10% in the last 5 trading sessions. And that was because the company, put a preliminary report out, which they tend to do before they report their earnings. 4,500 new rail cars for the quarter ending February 28th. They said that was roughly in line with their expectations. It did seem like it was above Wall Street's expectations, and the cars ordered included auto racks, box cars, and covered hoppers, and even some tank cars. So fairly broad. I think that order volume of 4,500 sort of gets you close to 20,000 on an annual basis. And I don't know that that was one of their seasonally stronger, quarters, if there's one that's seasonally stronger. So it seems like people are still ordering rail cars for the rail carload segment. And sort of notable, they didn't have any intermodal orders, but why would you order intermodal cars when the data shows what the data shows I talked about earlier? So people are still ordering rail cars, and that's about the time we have. Where can people sign up for the rail newsletter?
Sure. Yeah. So at the link at there's a link at the end of my articles that sends you to the page where you can sign up for the rail newsletter, as well as all the newsletters that FreightWaves provides. So sign up.
Okay, so go ahead and do that. www.freightwaves.com/subscribe. Subscribe to all our newsletters, and hope everyone has a great day.